Imagine holding two ordinary pennies worth a fortune. One was struck in 1969 at the San Francisco Mint with a mistake so dramatic that federal agents seized it believing it was counterfeit. The other was minted in 1994 at the Philadelphia Mint with two letters barely touching when they should be far apart. Both looked like normal coins. Both passed through thousands of hands unnoticed. And the terrifying part is that more could be out there right now in someone's pocket or coin jar. Stay with me because you might be holding one without knowing it. The year was 1969, and the United States was a nation pulsing with energy, conflict, and change on a scale that few generations had ever witnessed. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon in July of that year, planting the American flag in lunar soil and declaring it a giant leap for mankind, a moment of triumph that momentarily united a country that was otherwise fracturing along every conceivable seam. The Vietnam War was tearing the social fabric apart, with more than 500,000 American soldiers deployed across Southeast Asia, and the draft was pulling young men from every corner of the nation into a jungle war that many could not understand and increasingly refused to support. The Tet Offensive of 1968 had shattered the illusion that victory was near, and by the time Richard Nixon took the oath of office on January 20th of 1969, the American people were weary, skeptical, and hungry for something to believe in. The counterculture was in full bloom, with the Woodstock Music and Art Fair drawing nearly 500,000 people to a dairy farm in Bethel, New York, that August, an event that came to symbolize an entire generation and its rejection of the values and conventions that had governed American life since the end of World War II. Hippies, yippies, anti-war activists, civil rights workers, feminists, and environmentalists were all pushing against the boundaries of what had been considered acceptable in American society, and the establishment was pushing back with force and determination. Race relations remained one of the most volatile and painful issues in the country, with the memory of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination still raw and the Watts riots and Newark riots still fresh in the collective memory. Schools were being desegregated, neighborhoods were being redlined, and the promise of equal opportunity remained elusive for millions of African Americans despite the legislative achievements of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Against this sweeping canvas of social transformation and political turbulence, the United States Mint was quietly going about its business, producing the coins that Americans used every day to buy groceries, pay bus fare, and feed parking meters. The Lincoln Memorial Cent was one of those coins, a small piece of copper that passed through millions of hands each day without a second glance, and yet it was a coin that carried within it a remarkable story of design, history, and eventual numismatic fame that would unfold over the decades to come. The Lincoln Memorial Cent had been born a decade earlier, in 1959, when the United States Mint decided to replace the beloved wheat ears reverse that had graced the 1-cent coin since 1909 with a new design commemorating the sesquicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The original Lincoln cent, introduced in 1909 to mark the 100th anniversary of the president's birth, had been the first circulating American coin to feature the portrait of a real person rather than an allegorical figure like Lady Liberty, and it had been the brainchild of President Theodore Roosevelt, who had befriended the sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens and embarked on a mission to bring artistic beauty to American coinage. The portrait of Lincoln used on the obverse was the creation of Victor David Brenner, a Lithuanian-born artist whose design was based on a photograph taken by Anthony Berger in 1864 at the Matthew Brady Studio in Washington. When the decision was made in the late 1950s to update the reverse of the coin, the task fell to Frank Gasparo, an engraver at the United States Mint, who would later become the 11th chief engraver and go on to design the reverse of the Kennedy half-dollar and the Susan B. Anthony dollar. Gasparo created a detailed and architecturally accurate rendering of the Lincoln Memorial, the neoclassical monument designed by Henry Bacon and dedicated in 1922, a building that housed Daniel Chester French's massive seated statue of Lincoln and that had become one of the most recognizable landmarks in the nation's capital. The new reverse design was approved by Treasury Secretary Robert Anderson and entered production in 1959, and by 1969 it had been in circulation for a full decade, long enough to become a familiar and unremarkable part of the American landscape. The coin was composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, a composition that had been adopted in 1962 when the mint removed tin from the earlier bronze alloy in order to simplify production and reduce costs. In 1969, the metal content of each cent was worth only a fraction of its face value, and the coin was a profitable product for the Treasury, generating what numismatists call seigniorage, the difference between the cost of producing a coin and its face value, which the government effectively pockets as revenue. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 370 million Lincoln cents that year without a mint mark. The Denver Mint produced more than 1 billion coins bearing the D mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint struck over 500 million circulation coins bearing the S mint mark, along with approximately 2.5 million proof coins for collectors. These were enormous mintages by any standard, and they reflected the fact that the penny was still a vital component of everyday commerce in an economy where a gallon of gasoline cost about 35 cents, a loaf of bread cost about 23 cents, and a first-class postage stamp cost 6 cents. The economic climate of 1969 was one of growing unease beneath a surface of continued prosperity. The gross national product was expanding, unemployment was low, and the stock market was performing well, but inflation was becoming a persistent and troubling problem that would haunt the Nixon administration throughout its first term. The Federal Reserve, under the leadership of Chairman William McChesney Martin, had been raising interest rates in an effort to cool down an economy that was overheating from the combined fiscal stimulus of the Vietnam War and the Great Society programs of the Johnson years. Martin, who had been appointed by President Truman in 1951 and had served longer than any other Fed chairman in history, was a conservative and cautious policymaker who believed in the importance of maintaining price stability even at the risk of slowing economic growth. His tight money policies in 1969 contributed to a mild recession that began in December of that year and lasted until November of 1970, a downturn that was relatively mild by historical standards, but that nonetheless caused real hardship for American families and businesses. The international monetary system was also under strain, as foreign governments, particularly France under President Charles de Gaulle, were increasingly skeptical of the United States' commitment to maintaining the dollar convertibility into gold at $35 per ounce, the linchpin of the Bretton Woods Agreement that had structured global finance since 1944. The United States gold reserves were being drained as foreign central banks exchanged their dollar holdings for gold, and the writing was on the wall for the system that had governed international trade and finance for a quarter century. Nixon would eventually close the gold window in August of 1971, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system and ushering in the modern era of floating exchange rates. But in 1969, the system was still technically intact, though clearly under enormous pressure. In this environment of economic transition and uncertainty, the production of coinage was a practical necessity that the mint carried out with efficiency and precision, and the Lincoln cent was the most heavily produced of all denominations, the coin that kept the gears of everyday commerce turning from coast to coast. It was at the San Francisco Mint that the most extraordinary event in the history of the Lincoln Memorial Cent series occurred, an event that would transform an ordinary 1-cent coin into one of the most sought-after and valuable rarities in all of American numismatics. During the process of preparing the dies used to strike the 1969 Lincoln cents, a misalignment occurred between the hub and the working die, resulting in a doubled image on the obverse of the coin that was visible in the lettering of the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, and most dramatically in the date itself. This type of error, known as a double die, happens when the hub, which carries the positive image of the coin design, is impressed into the working die more than once, and the two impressions are not perfectly aligned, creating a ghostly doubling effect on the finished coins. The 1969 S double die obverse was not a subtle variety that could only be detected under a microscope. It was a bold and unmistakable doubling that was immediately apparent to anyone who looked closely at the coin, and it was this dramatic visual quality that would eventually make the variety so famous and so desirable among collectors. The exact circumstances that led to the creation of the double die are not known with certainty, but it is likely that a small number of working dies were affected and that a relatively small number of coins were struck from those dies before the error was noticed or the die was retired from service. What makes the story of the 1969 S double die particularly remarkable is the controversy that surrounded its initial discovery. When the first examples began to surface in the early 1970s, the doubling was so pronounced that some experts in the numismatic community suspected the coins might be counterfeits, the product of some ingenious forger who had somehow managed to create a convincing double image on genuine cent planchets. The situation became so serious that the United States Secret Service, the federal agency tasked with investigating crimes involving counterfeit currency, reportedly seized several examples of the coin and conducted a thorough investigation to determine whether they were genuine mint products or sophisticated fakes. After careful metallurgical analysis and die study, the Secret Service concluded that the coins were authentic, genuine products of the San Francisco Mint, and the seized examples were returned to their owners. This extraordinary episode, involving federal agents, suspicious experts, and a rare coin that turned out to be genuine, added a layer of intrigue and legend to the 1969 S double die that has only grown with the passage of time and has helped to cement its status as one of the most famous and storied era coins in American history. Today, the 1969 S double die obverse Lincoln cent is recognized as one of the rarest and most valuable varieties in the entire Lincoln cent series, and its estimated surviving population is thought to be somewhere in the range of 15 to 30 known specimens, though some researchers have suggested the number could be as high as 100, with new examples occasionally being discovered in old proof sets and rolls that have sat untouched for decades. The vast majority of known examples are in uncirculated condition, which makes sense given that the error was first identified among proof coins and coins that had been carefully preserved by collectors, though a small number of circulated examples are also known, suggesting that at least some of the double die coins entered general circulation before the error was recognized. In circulated condition, a genuine 1969 S double die obverse Lincoln cent typically sells for between $20,000 and $40,000, depending on the grade and visual appeal, with coins graded extremely fine or about uncirculated commanding the lower end of that range, and coins in higher circulated grades approaching the upper end. In uncirculated condition, the values climb steeply, with a coin graded mint state 63 red-brown typically bringing $50,000 to $75,000 at auction, and a coin graded mint state 63 red, meaning it retains nearly all of its original mint luster and red color, potentially selling for $75,000 to $100,000. The absolute finest known examples, those graded mint state 64 red and brown or higher by the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, have sold for prices exceeding $100,000, and the single finest known specimen, if it were to appear at auction today, could potentially command a price of $150,000 or more. Though such appearances are extremely rare and generate enormous excitement and competition among serious collectors whenever they occur. The value of the 1969 S double die is driven by a combination of factors that together make it a truly exceptional numismatic specimen, including its extreme rarity, the dramatic and unmistakable nature of the doubling, the compelling story of its discovery and the Secret Service investigation, and the fact that it belongs to the Lincoln Cent series, which is one of the most widely collected and deeply studied series in all of American numismatics, with a devoted following that spans generations and continents. For the collector who dreams of owning one, the 1969 S-double die obverse Lincoln Cent represents the pinnacle of achievement in Lincoln Cent collecting, a coin that combines history, artistry, error, and controversy in a single small piece of copper that was struck in a year when the United States was reaching for the moon and wrestling with its soul. A year that tested the nation's resolve and reshaped its identity, and a year that produced, quite by accident, one of the most extraordinary coins in the history of American money. To understand why the 1994 Lincoln Memorial Cent became the subject of such intense fascination among coin collectors, it is first necessary to understand in considerable detail how coins are manufactured at the United States Mint, a process that involves multiple stages of painstaking preparation and a chain of tools and techniques that have been refined over more than 2 centuries of American coinage production. The journey of every coin begins with an artist, a sculptor who creates the original design in clay or plaster on a scale much larger than the finished coin, sometimes 3 to 8 times the actual size. And from this original model, a reduction lathe or a modern digital engraving system is used to cut a master hub, a single piece of hardened steel that carries the positive image of the coin design, meaning that the design looks exactly as it will appear on the finished coin. Raised where it should be raised and recessed where it should be recessed. This master hub is then used to create a master die, which is the negative image of the design, meaning that the portrait of Lincoln and the lettering and the date are all sunk into the steel rather than raised on it. And this master die is in turn used to strike working hubs, which are again positive images. And these working hubs are then used to produce the working dies, the actual tools that will be placed in the coin presses and used to strike the planchets, the blank discs of metal that will become the finished coins. Each working die is a negative image, a mirror of the design, and when it is pressed against a planchet with enormous force, the design is transferred to the soft metal of the planchet, creating a coin with raised design elements and recessed fields. The planchets themselves are manufactured from strips of metal alloy that are fed through a punching machine that cuts out blank discs of the appropriate diameter, and these blanks are then subjected to a process called upsetting, which raises a rim around the edge of the planchet to help protect the design from wear, and to ensure that the coins stack properly, and after upsetting the planchets are cleaned and annealed, meaning they are heated and cooled to soften the metal and make it more receptive to the striking process. At the Philadelphia Mint in 1994, the coin presses were massive machines capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, each one generating tons of pressure to force the metal of the planchet into every recess of the obverse and reverse dies, and the quality of each coin depended on the condition of the dies, the alignment of the press, the cleanliness of the planchets, and dozens of other factors that had to be controlled with precision to produce coins that met the standards of the United States Mint. The Lincoln Memorial Cent in 1994 was composed of a copper-plated zinc core, a composition that had been adopted in 1982 when the rising price of copper had made the older solid copper cent too expensive to produce, and each planchet consisted of a zinc disc that was electroplated with a thin layer of pure copper, giving the coin its familiar reddish-golden color while keeping the cost of production well below the 1-cent face value of the coin. The obverse die carried the portrait of Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner and first introduced in 1909, along with the legend Liberty, the national motto In God We Trust, and the date 1994, while the reverse die carried Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial, along with the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 cent. And it was on this reverse that the extraordinary and rare variety of the 1994 cent would be found. The specific error that made certain 1994 Philadelphia Lincoln cents extraordinarily rare is known among numismatists as the close AM variety, and to understand what this means and why it occurred, it is necessary to delve into the history of the reverse die design used for the Lincoln Memorial Cent and the changes that took place in the early 1990s at the United States Mint. The letters A and M in the word America on the reverse of the Lincoln Memorial Cent had been spaced a certain distance apart since the design was introduced in 1959, with a clear and visible gap between the two letters that was consistent across all business strike cents produced at all three mints for more than 3 decades. This spacing was part of Frank Gasparo's original design and was maintained in the master hub and all subsequent working hubs and working dies throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and collectors and mint employees alike became so accustomed to this appearance that it was simply accepted as the normal and correct configuration of the reverse design. However, in the early 1990s, the Mint made a decision to modify the reverse hub for the Lincoln Cent, and the most noticeable change in this new hub was that the letters A and M in America were positioned much closer together, so close in fact that the right leg of the A and the left leg of the M nearly touched, with only the thinnest sliver of space separating them, and in some lighting conditions, and on some specimens, the two letters appeared to be almost fused together. This close AM design was intended to be used exclusively for proof coins, the specially struck collector coins that were produced at the San Francisco Mint with polished planchets, specially prepared dies, and multiple strikes to ensure maximum sharpness and beauty, and the business strike coins, the ordinary coins produced for circulation at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, were supposed to continue using the old wide AM reverse hub. The reason for the change has never been officially explained by the Mint in any comprehensive or authoritative way, but numismatic researchers have speculated that it was part of an effort to modernize and refresh the appearance of the coin, or that it was related to the process of creating new master hubs as the old ones aged and needed to be replaced, or that it was simply an aesthetic decision made by someone in the engraving department who felt that the tighter letter spacing gave the reverse a more unified and elegant appearance. Whatever the reason, the new close AM hub was created and put into service, and the critical error that created the rare 1994 Philadelphia close AM cent occurred when at least one working die carrying the close AM reverse design was accidentally sent to the Philadelphia Mint and placed into production on a coin press that was striking business strike Lincoln cents for circulation, rather than being sent to San Francisco for use on proof coins where it belonged. This kind of mix-up was not entirely unprecedented in the history of the Mint. Similar errors had occurred in other years and with other denominations, but the 1994 Philadelphia close AM was particularly significant because the number of coins struck from the erroneous die was very small, and because the difference between the close AM and wide AM reverses was subtle enough that the error went unnoticed at the Mint, and in general circulation for years before collectors finally identified it. The reason the error went unnoticed for so long is rooted in the nature of the difference itself, and in the way coins were handled and examined in the 1990s, an era before digital photography and online collector communities made the rapid identification and dissemination of variety discoveries a routine occurrence. The difference between the close AM and wide AM reverses was not a dramatic doubling or a glaring misstrike that would be immediately obvious to anyone who glanced at the coin. It was a subtle variation in letter spacing that required careful examination and comparison to detect. And even an experienced Mint employee working on the production floor would have had no reason to scrutinize the reverse of each coin for such a minute detail when the presses were running at full speed and producing coins by the thousands per hour. The quality control procedures at the Mint in the 1990s were focused on detecting gross errors such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks, not on comparing letter spacing on the reverse of a 1-cent coin to a reference standard, and the close AM die would have looked perfectly normal and correct to anyone who did not have a wide AM coin side by side for comparison. Moreover, the Lincoln cent was the most common and least valued coin in American circulation, a coin that most people spent or received without ever looking at it closely, and the idea that a 1994 Philadelphia cent might harbor a rare and valuable variety was simply not on the radar of the vast majority of collectors at that time. The discovery of the close AM variety on the 1994 Philadelphia cent did not come until years later, when dedicated variety researchers and Lincoln cent specialists began systematically examining reverse dies across multiple years and mints, and noticed that some 1994 Philadelphia cents displayed the close AM configuration that was supposed to be found only on proof coins. The identification process required careful study under magnification, side-by-side comparison with known wide AM and close AM specimens, and consultation among leading experts in the field to confirm that the variety was genuine and not the product of die wear, damage, or alteration. Once the variety was confirmed, the hunt began in earnest, with collectors searching through rolls, bags, and accumulated stashes of 1994 Philadelphia cents in an effort to find additional examples, and the results of those searches revealed that the variety was extraordinarily rare, far rarer than most collectors had anticipated. With only a handful of specimens surfacing despite years of intensive searching by some of the most dedicated and experienced variety hunters in the numismatic community. To identify a genuine 1994 Philadelphia close AM Lincoln cent, a collector needs to examine the reverse of the coin, specifically the word America in the legend at the top of the reverse design, and look at the spacing between the letters A and M at the end of the word. On the normal wide AM reverse, which is what the overwhelming majority of 1994 Philadelphia cents display, there is a clear and distinct gap between the right leg of the A and the left leg of the M, a gap that is easily visible even without magnification, and that gives the two letters the appearance of being separate and independent characters. On the close AM variety, this gap is dramatically reduced, so much so that the right leg of the A and the left leg of the M are nearly touching, with only a hairline separation that in some cases is barely perceptible even under magnification. And on well-struck examples, the two letters can appear to be almost joined together at the baseline, creating a visual effect that is unmistakably different from the standard wide AM configuration once the observer knows what to look for. The difference is most easily seen when the coin is examined under a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe at 5 to 10 times magnification, and it is even more apparent when a close AM specimen is placed directly beside a wide AM specimen of the same year and mint for side-by-side comparison, at which point the variation in letter spacing becomes immediately and dramatically obvious even to an untrained eye. In addition to the letter spacing, there are other diagnostic features that can help confirm the authenticity of a close AM variety, including subtle differences in the shape and positioning of the letters in the word one and the word cent, as well as minor variations in the details of the Lincoln Memorial itself, particularly in the columns and the steps, which tend to be slightly sharper and more defined on the close AM die than on the wide AM die. Reflecting the fact that the close AM hub was created with proof coin production in mind, and therefore may have been produced to a higher standard of detail and sharpness. Collectors should also be aware that die wear, polishing, and other forms of deterioration can sometimes create the illusion of closer letter spacing on a wide AM coin, and for this reason it is essential that any suspected close AM variety be authenticated by one of the major third-party grading services, the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, both of which have extensive experience with this variety and maintain detailed records of all confirmed examples that have been submitted for certification. The number of genuine 1994 Philadelphia close AM Lincoln cents that are believed to survive today is extremely small, with most estimates from leading researchers and grading services placing the total known population at fewer than 24 specimens, though some experts believe that additional examples may still exist in old collections rolls, and accumulations that have not yet been searched with the close AM variety specifically in mind. The condition of the known examples varies considerably, with some specimens showing significant wear from circulation and others remaining in pristine uncirculated condition with full original mint red color, and the value of the coin is heavily dependent on the grade assigned by one of the major certification services. In the lowest circulated grades, such as about good or good condition, a genuine 1994 Philadelphia Close AM cent might sell for between $500 and $1,000. Reflecting the fact that even in worn condition, the variety is extremely rare and highly sought after by Lincoln cent specialists and variety collectors. In higher circulated grades, such as extremely fine or about uncirculated, the value increases to the range of $1,500 to $3,000. As the closer the coin is to its original mint state, the more desirable it becomes to collectors who prize both rarity and quality. In uncirculated condition, the prices climb steeply, with a coin graded mint state 63 red-brown typically commanding between $3,000 and $5,000, and a coin graded mint state 63 red, meaning it retains nearly all of its original brilliant copper-red color and shows no evidence of wear or tunning, potentially selling for $7,000 to $10,000 at auction. The finest known examples, those graded mint state 64 red or higher, are extraordinarily rare and have sold for prices in excess of $15,000, with the absolute finest known specimen potentially commanding $20,000 or more if it were to appear at a major auction today. A remarkable valuation for a coin with a face value of 1 cent, and a testament to the extraordinary power of rarity and discovery in the world of numismatics. The 1994 Philadelphia Close AM Lincoln cent stands as a vivid reminder that even in the modern era of mechanized and computerized coin production, the possibility of error and the creation of something genuinely rare and valuable is always present, and that the most ordinary objects can sometimes hide within them the most extraordinary secrets, waiting to be discovered by those with the patience, the knowledge, and the determination to look closely at what everyone else has overlooked.